What's up, Wizards? It's Dev. We're on Twitch.tv live looking at some Murders of Karlov Manor stuff. It's not quite actually spoiler season yet. Don't worry, we're not doing like a Twilight Zone thing where the new set just came out. There's spoilers. That happened last time a new set came out. Nah, this set doesn't come out for another 2 months, but we went ahead and got a little sneak peek ski from Blake Rasmussen today and got to see like 20 cards from the set. So don't worry. It's not already spoiler season again. That won't happen until like mid-January, but they figured for the holiday season, maybe we want to see some new cards, and I did. So let's get excited. About half of these cards are actually pretty interesting, and then half of them are magic cards. So let's get into some reprints first because Shock is here. You guys see that Shock is here? There's better cards in Standard than Shock right now, so I guess it doesn't really matter, but Shock is in the set. I guess you could play with Fire and Shock if you want to play like some burn, and there's a reason you might want to play a burn deck. We'll see it in a second, but first we'll look at Magnifying Glass. Just 3 mana, you can tap it for a colorless, you can pay 4, tap it, investigate. This card already exists. The older art is much more off-putting and just probably cooler. This just plainly depicts a magnifying glass. It's even more boring than the first one. Who cares? So let's look at Lightning Helix. Baby, this is, in case you've never seen this, it's Boros colors for an instant. It hits any target for 3, and you gain 3 life. So that is a good magic card. It's always been a good magic card. I don't really know what it does in Standard. Maybe some kind of Jeskai? Why do I think Jeskai? I don't know. It's something like that. But maybe because if you go Mardu, maybe Mardu with Archangel, right? The one that you can kick to do damage and you gain a life according to the damage that you dealt. And then you play some other burn spells. You play Sacred Fire and you play Hard Flame Duelist and all this stuff. Right? It's probably a terrible deck. It's a bad deck. So I'm not really sure what this goes in. There is a Boros aggro deck in Standard. There's actually 2 different Boros aggro decks in Standard, an Imbecile and Imodane Recruiter, or Boros Convoke, whatever you want to call it. And I'm not sure either one of them play this card. I don't know, man. Like, they're both really creature-focused decks, and I don't know if they just want to play, like, Get Lost or Fateful Absence or some other, like, point-and-click, kill anything removal spell. This doesn't really do that. Like, maybe it's a sideboard card against aggro decks so you can win the race. I don't really know, though, but I know that Lightning Helix is a sick card, but this all boils down to I also think it's probably fine in Standard. Totally fine, right? It's fine. Yeah, it's in Modern Burn, sure, but is there a Standard Burn deck that uses, like, the Red Virtue? Right, the Red Virtue is pretty sweet. That's all I got. Like Lightning Strike, Stoke the Flames, Lightning Helix, Sacred Fire, maybe. This is just a better Sacred Fire is always a worse Lightning Helix. So do you play both? Probably not. So I'm interested in the idea, but ultimately is probably not. You know, it's weird to say about Lightning Helix, but it's got to find a home, and I'm just not sure it actually does. I'm just not really sure. But with that said, let's get into the new stuff today, and that is where we have to look at some drafty Bumkiss. You know, like about 10 cards that we're going to speed run through here that aren't worth a Wendy's French fry, just not worth a fart in a bathhouse. Out cold first, 4 mana for an instant that for some reason cannot be countered, but it taps up to 2 target creatures and put a stun counter on each of them, and then you investigate, right? So 4 mana to do an awful lot of things that you're guaranteed to get through. But like, so honestly, like, so who cares? It's not, it doesn't really do it. I like the art, the big block of ice with like a giant mouse or like a dinosaur. I don't know what's in there. It's a couple of guys are in there with it. It's fun art, but what a bad Magikarp. Why does it cost 4 mana? Hotshot Investigator's up next. Costs 6 mana. It's 4/4 Vidalcan Detective, which is a new creature type. We got detectives now. When an ETBs, you return up to 1 other target creature to its owner's hand. If you controlled that creature, investigate. So it's drafty. 6 mana, 4/4, mana war. And if you pop something back to your hand, you investigate. What terrible value. It's 6 mana. Come on, man. Benthic Criminologist up next. 5 mana for a 4/5 Merfolk Wizard. And when it enters the battlefield or attacks, you can sack an artifact if you do draw a card. So just go ahead and get the value off your clue, I guess, without having to pay mana for it. It's bad. It's a bad card. Fanatical Strength is up next. 2 mana for an instant that gets a guy. Gets +3/+3 against tramps until end of turn. It is a combat trick. It's not good. It's not very good. Topiary Panther's up next. At least it's cool looking. 6 mana for a 6/5 plant cat with trample and basic land psyching. Basic land, that's a whole different thing. Basic land cycling, 2 mana. This is kind of neat. This is the first card that I have to say is kind of neat, but limited only. This is Curious Cadaver. 4 mana, 2, a black and a blue for a 3/1 zombie detective. That's a weird combination of creature types when you really think about it. He's just trying to find the brains. That's the thing, is he's just always on the case. Trying to find the brain. Where are the brains? I could stiff him out. He's got flying, and when you sacrifice a clue, you return him from your graveyard to your hand. Really interesting little draft card here that might win a couple of games, but that's probably about where it stops. Meddling Utes. Meddling Utes is 5 mana for a 4/5 human detective with haste. Whenever you attack with 3 or more creatures, investigate. It's terrible. It's not a very good card at all. In fact, Burden of Proof is up next. 2 mana for an enchantment aura with flash. It enchants a creature. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2 as long as it's a detective you control. But if it's not a cop, it has base power and toughness 1/1 and can't block cops. So that's a neat little piece of removal, I guess. But that's basically where the terrible cards end. And we get to start talking about good cards. How long did that take? I don't think it took too long, so I think that's pretty good. Gleaming Geardrake is our first kind of neat little piece here. It's 2 mana. Izzet colors, red and blue. For Izzet colors, yes, red and blue, in fact. For a 1/1 artifact Drake with flying. And when it ETBs, you investigate. And whenever you sacrifice an artifact, you put a +1/+1 counter on Gleaming Geardrake. It's super neat, right? Because there's other ways to sack in artifacts, and obviously this works with treasures. You know, any artifact you can sacrifice for free is actually pretty sexy with, because it's, first of all, 2 mana 1/1 flyer, investigate on ETB. Hot. That's already like very attractive, and I would date it. You know what I mean? It's okay. Okay, call me is all I'm saying. That's pretty good. So I'm a little bit into this just based on like face value, but even if you're not sacrificing clues, you're sacrificing like artifact creatures to some sort of aristocrats effect, or maybe you're playing food fight or something like that. There's like a million ways to sacrifice artifacts by paying very little or 0 mana. You got an experimental synthesizer laying around, you sack that to something, put a +1/+1 counter on Geardrake. It's all very good sounding to me. It's I don't know, man. Pretty cool, I would actually say. Even if it's just like treasure is all we're really thinking about. Still very awesome. So, and actually there's a couple of things, like creates an artifact, not Urabrass Forge, not that, but I think there might be things that like create an artifact token and you sack it in a turn or something, and this will get a +1/+1 counter every time you do that. This would normally, I would expect a card in 2023 like this to say that it only procs once per turn, but it triggers as often as you sack artifacts. That's disgusting. So like Dockside Extortionist and Commander. Gleaming Geardrake, just fly 3 for 7 immediately. I honestly could see this being like a 2 mana 4/4 like really easily. So I think it's a good card. I'm pretty excited about it. Pretty excited about it. That's all I'm saying. We'll move on to Deduce. This is 2 mana for an instant. Draw a card, investigate. This is probably just better than Think Twice. And that's a pretty good card. Just 2 mana, draw a card, flash it back for 3 at instant speed. I would probably play that in standard. Would I play that in standard over like Thirst for Discovery? I don't know, maybe, but still depends on the format. But Think Twice has been a playable card before. This kind of reminds me of that, but you also get some artifact value off of it, and that's pretty cool. So, permanent on the table is a permanent on the table. You can do all kinds of stuff with that. So it could even be a boat. So I don't know. It's 2 mana for draw a card up front at instant speed, and get something else. Eventually draws another card. Costs some mana, but again, it's less mana than a Think Twice, and like that's a playable card. So I think it's good. I think this is actually a pretty sweet little card, and it's common too, so it might be worth at least pointing out. Demand Answers. Speaking of drawing cards, baby. Yeah, you can bargain it away. That's the thing you can do with an artifact token. You can also Demand Answers, buddy. This is 2 mana for an instant. As an additional cost to cast it, you can discard a card or sacrifice an artifact, and it's draw 2 cards. So, like instant speed Tormenting Voice, right? It's literally just instant speed. There's already a couple of those, but like instant speed Tormenting Voice. 2 mana, draw 2 cards at the cost of discarding a card up front. But this one, instead, sacrifice an artifact is so awesome because there's just a million artifacts laying around between like maps and clues and treasures. And there's like 2 more blood tokens. There's so many artifact tokens, dude. They're just like sitting there like grapefruits in this format, whatever that means. So, like, this could be like, the thing with Tormenting Voice is that it's usually card neutral, right? Like, you spend a card from your hand, Tormenting Voice itself, and you discard a card, and you draw 2 cards. So 2 cards, 2 cards. But in this case, it's still technically card neutral, technically again, but like, you're sacrificing a junk artifact to draw those 2 cards. So it's actually pretty okay. Is this just like, what is it, Reckoner's Bargain? Is that already in black? Like, sacrifice an artifact or a creature to draw 2 cards at instant speed? This is just like a red version of that, and it could be really, really good in certain decks. So I like it. Didn't have to be instant speed either, and they let it be. So kind of good, kind of okay. Yeah. So let's look at Novice Inspector, a little familiar kind of. This is a single white mana for a human detective. He's a 1/2. When it enters the battlefield, you investigate as a Thraben Inspector, just like is a Thraben Inspector. They didn't even try, but that makes it good. It makes it awesome. I was just raving back there about the 2 mana guy that ETBs get you a treasure token. What's better than that? 1 mana guy ETBs get you a treasure. He's common too, so that's pretty cool. Point that out for like Pauper and stuff, I guess. But and just like standard artisan stuff, whatever. Who cares? Whatever you want to do. Just a great card for cubes. I like stuff like this. Basically, a Thraben Inspector pseudo side print right here, and we already know how good this card is. We already know exactly how incredible this card is. So I want to play with it. That's basically all there is to it, man. Puts an artifact into play. A lot of decks are going to like that. 1/2 blocking body a lot of the time. So Thraben Inspector has always been sweet, and I don't expect this to be any different, man. Just probably like actually kind of in the top 3 cards that we saw today. Honestly, yeah. Ooh, Anvil decks? This Anvil decks? Yeah, Demand Answers. I like that. I like it. But Novice Inspector, that's the thing, is I don't know where this card goes in standard, but it could just be a good 1-drop in like mono white control or whatever it's called, mono white mid-range. Because they like stuff like this. I think it could work its way into a deck or 2. It's also, there's a mono white humans deck. But I think it already has like better 1-drops than this because it wants to get aggressive. But still investigate. When it ETBs, draw a card a few turns later. It's really good. It's Rakdos, Patron of Chaos, though, is our first like higher rarity card here. It's neat, but it's 6 mana. It's 4 in Rakdos colors for a 6/6 legendary demon with Flample, and at the beginning of your end step, target opponent may sack 2 non-land, non-token permanents. If they don't, you get to draw 2 cards. So what this card actually says is 6 mana 6/6 Flample. At your end step, draw 2 cards. That's basically, it's always going to say that. Basically every time. I guess that it goes like kind of well with Shieldred. All right. You draw 2 cards, gain 4 life, and you've got a 4/5 death touch, a 6/6 flying trample. Life's doing pretty well, but I don't know. It costs so much mana, dude. It costs a ridiculous amount of mana. It does something the turn it comes into play, but it doesn't actually do anything like ETB. So I don't know. 6/6 Flample is like, it has to be respected, but 6 mana is probably too much to cast any card not named. There's probably only like 3 cards that cost 6 in standard you can actually play. So I'm not even going to try. Aurelia, the Law Above, is up next. 5 mana, 3 in Boros colors, so red and white for a 4/4 legendary angel with flying, vigilance, and haste. Whenever a player attacks with 3 or more creatures, you draw a card. Whenever any player attacks with 5 or more creatures, Aurelia, Law Above, cast Lightning Helix to the dome. It does 3 damage to each of your opponents, and you gain 3 life. Note that it does the 3 damage to everybody. Each of your opponents, kind of neat. But this is also 5 mana. At least it has haste. It can do a lot the turn it comes into play. Obviously, not only can it attack with the haste, that's kind of nice, but if you got 2 other things attacking at the same time, drawing a card is pretty good, man. Ain't nothing wrong with that. You can put it in your Angels deck, I guess. If you want to do that, you can. But I could see it being pretty easy to engineer a situation where you're going to draw a card, but I can also see it in a deck that like wants to be so aggressive that it's attacking with 2 other guys the turn this comes down. You probably just want to be winning the game the turn this comes into play. So I'm not sure how good the draw card is, but if I will also say this, If you're not going to win the game that turn, then drawing a card really helps. And then you've got a 4/4 vigilance, up. It attacked, but it's still up, waiting to block, so that's pretty good. If you do get in with 4 other guys, casting Lightning Helix and drawing a card is really powerful. But, the Lightning Helix mode is not that great. I mean, it could give you the extra reach that you need to win, or win the race so that you don't die on crackbacks, because, you gain the 3 life. So there's good stuff about it. But ultimately, it's not like Goldspan Dragon, but it is a good card. I do think we're getting there now. We're looking playable. Yeah, great commander. Yeah, I think it probably is a fun commander, if nothing else. But I want to try it in a court. It's a Boros or Mardu Angels list and kind of see how that works out. But it's like this or Boonbringer Valkyrie in the 5-drop slot. What do you play? And I think Boonbringer probably better, but drawing a card, and it's fairly easy, I think, to proc this mode. Not bad at all, obviously. So let's move on to Not On My Watch. We get to look at a treatment here, and it's not a good one, but it's sorry to the artist. Nothing against you. The art itself is actually pretty good. I don't care for this treatment, but it's not the worst treatment that we'll see in this video. Not On My Watch, though, is a good card. This is 2 mana, 1 and a white for an instant. Exile target attacking creature for very simple words that are awesome. That's just a good card. Sick card. Kind of Wandering Emperor then for 2 mana. I'm not really sure how great it is with Get Lost in the format, but it's worth noting it's exile, and exiling stuff is awesome. Exiling stuff is so good, man. So probably, see some 1 or 2 of play, maybe some sideboard play against aggro decks or whatever. So really clean removal spell, if nothing else. Maybe commander play, cube play. This is a really clean little cube, 2-drop white removal spell. Although if you're playing cube, you've got your pick of those, right? I'm not sure this takes the slot, but still really clean little card here, and I like those. It's not often in 2023 that you see such simplicity, so I admire it. Alquist Proft Master's Sleuth is up next. This is not some sort of weird fan-made card or dumb secret layer that they're doing. This is an art. This is a treatment. This is a treatment for a card. In the set, this is Alquist Proft Master's Sleuth. 3 mana, 1, a white and a blue for a tree legendary human detective with vigilance. And whenever Alquist Proft Master Sleuth enters the battlefield, you investigate. You can also cast Sphinx's Revelation. You can pay X white and 2 blue, tap, sack a clue. You draw X cards, you gain X life. So it's cool that he has vigilance and can also cast Sphinx's. Why can he cast Sphinx's Revelation? It's just so weird that he can do that, but here's the deal. Obviously, this dossier was made by him. Vigilance, handsome, genius. Okay, so this guy did it. This is like the main guy investigating the case. He totally did it. Look at him. He's a narcissist too. Handsome, genius. Come on, man. And legendary. But of course I'm legendary. And he puts an arrow to it. Come on, man. This guy did it. This is the guy. This is the guy. Come on. It's the perfect crime. You investigate the crime you committed. This was just an episode of The Simpsons. It was a Treehouse of Horror episode where they were spoofing Seven, right? I don't know if anybody watches The Simpsons anymore, but it was this year's Treehouse of Horror where it takes place in the future and they're spoofing Seven, but also kind of Silence of the Lambs a little bit, because Lisa's going back and forth to see to Sideshow Bob, and Sideshow Bob's telling her about serial killers, but it's also Seven somehow. It's a weird episode, but it turns out at the end, spoiler alert, Lisa's been the one committing the crimes, so she could go to jail, the same jail as Sideshow Bob, and kill Sideshow Bob, because in this reality, Sideshow Bob actually succeeded in killing Bart. It's actually kind of an interesting Treehouse of Horror. But that's what's going on here, is the guy that investigates the things, he's the one that did the stuff. He did the stuff. It's him. It's good. Might be a red herring. Yeah, all of this could be a red herring. Like Aurelia. Oh, Aurelia did it, right? Because she's the one that's questioning them and demand answers. She's like, hey, find out who did this, or else in 3 days I'm going to attack the Rakdos. So that means, I think, in terms of storytelling, that means it can't be Aurelia. And although it could be Aurelia, but I don't think it's going to be Aurelia, and I don't think it's going to be anybody in the Rakdos Legion, right? So I think it's this guy, man. Come on, it's this guy. Come on. But anyway, are there more cards in the set? Yeah. Have we actually talked about how good this card is though? At all? I forgot that I was doing a YouTube video and I was in Twitch mode for a second there. I slipped back into it, but no, the card actually looks fine. There's my analysis. Look, 3 mana for a 3/3 vigilance. That's a keyword ability and an enter the battlefield trigger. And it does more stuff. In case you needed it to do more stuff, it also does that. Like, is it playable in Esper Legends? Maybe as a one of, So the stats aren't embarrassing. I don't know. It doesn't die to Wandering Emperor. It's fine. It's just fine, I guess. I'm not sure it actually makes it anywhere in Standard, which really tells you a lot about the state of Standard. Because imagine this card getting printed 12 years ago. It's really... People would be like, oh my god! But like nowadays you have to look at this and be like, 3 mana, 3/3, so it's got parallel, or whatever you want to say, the same casting cost as its PT. They threw a keyword ability on it. It's got ETB trigger. It casts a spell. Oh, that's the best creature I've ever seen. You can't, not really anymore. It's fine. But Wojek Investigator's next. This is 3 mana for a 2/4 Angel D Tech with flying and vigilance at the beginning of your upkeep. Investigate once for each opponent who has more cards in hand than you do. So this is the last new card that we're looking at. The reason it's the last card sort of in the video is because I think it's the most relevant for Commander, and that's what matters nowadays, isn't it, man? Just look at this. You can kind of draw 3 cards every turn, so long as you have very few cards in your hand. Shouldn't be too difficult to engineer. So I know it's going to cost you a bunch of mana to draw those cards, but maybe you just want a bunch of artifacts to come into play or to crack like eggs and do cool stuff with. Whenever an artifact goes to the graveyard, this happens, and you trigger them that way. There's a million things you can do with a bunch of investigate tokens, and even if we're clue tokens, and even if you only get 1 or 2 every turn, that's a lot of effective card advantage in white. It's not like a tireless tracker or anything, but it's close to a tireless tracker, in a way, and it's got evasion too. It's, I don't know, slapped vigilance on it. Neat little guy. And maybe even in Standard, it could do something, but I kind of doubt it, White's kind of slammed and crammed at the 3-drop slot right now for good cards, so it's probably doesn't quite make it, but I don't know. It's still white card advantage that puts permanents on the table, and ain't nothing wrong with that, baby. So good card. I just wanted to point this thing out because I think it might have a future in Commander, if nothing else. By which I mean it definitely has a future in Commander. So sweet card. Crashing Footfalls is the last card I want to look at. This is a special guest. Remember they said they were going to do special guests? These, for the best of my knowledge, are not playable in Standard, but they will just show up. I don't think they're doing a whole bonus sheet, but cards will just show up. Here's Crashing Footfalls. In case you've never seen it, so spend 4 for a green. That means that rather than casting it, you can pay 4. You can pay a green mana and exile it with 4 time counters on it. At the beginning of your upkeep, remove a time counter. When you remove the last time counter, you just cast it for freezies. And you just get 2 4/4 green rhino creature tokens to trample. So the only way you can cast this is by suspending it, unless you have special ways of casting it, which there are special ways of casting it without having to suspend it. So, you can always discover into it or something like that. So that's kind of cute. But still, Crashing Footfalls is a neat card. It's a cool special guest. Well, whatever. Well, it's fine. That's basically all of the cards that we got to see from this set today. Again, half of them are just draft chaff, showing off some of the mechanics, and I don't think we really got to see too much in the way of new mechanics in this sneak peek. I don't know. But we did get to see a bunch of cool cards, about half of them were stuff that you can actually theorize playing in Standard. Novice Inspector's pretty good. Demand Answers, Deduce, Gleaming Gear Drake looked really sweet. So a bunch of cool stuff that I'm kind of interested in, right? We're doing some artifact synergies in here. A bunch of investigate stuff. Aurelia looks like a pretty sweet card in mid-rangey decks that are going to attack. Not on my watch. Good removal. Alquist Proft is fine. Wojek Investigator goes in your Commander decks. So as they usually like to do with these sneak peeks, they didn't give us too much. It's not all that much to really look at, but something to wet our whistle, get a little bit excited about, see some of the stuff that's in this set. We're going to get some more Angels in the same format where Giada's still a playable card. That's kind of neat. So, just a little tasty, a pre-Christmas, pre-holiday taste of like what's to come, and I kind of like that. But again, it's going to be like 6 weeks until we actually get to spoiler season for the set, so still plenty of exploring to do in LCI Standard. You see what I did there? I'm very clever, so make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't done it yet for more just crackpot jokes that you've never heard before in your life. There's no way you've heard that before, I promise. But anyway, you can do all the other stuff too, like the video if you haven't done it yet. That's a good thing to do, I hear. Aside from that, you can check out the Patreon. Join us on Twitch, where you could be here watching us live. We're about to jump into some games with some magic cards. That's what we do. Some of the times. Check out and follow us on Twitch. Links in the description, all this stuff, and some other videos that we've done just recently here on the tubes. But aside from that, I'm basically donezo for this one, so I'll catch you cats later. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.